Welcome to Footy Mailbag. My name is Damo. This is another bonus episode. This week we have Lekdog. He's more of a draft man these days. He cares about Classic a lot less than he used to. And we're turning the tables this time. Instead of asking questions to him, he's going to ask questions to me. Thanks for joining me, Lek.
Mate, I'm just excited to be recording a podcast with you again. It's been probably a year since we did.
Yeah, because I think the last time we had you on was the preseason for the 2024 season.
Yeah, I think I spent a lot of time, or not a lot, a bit of time overseas last year, and we never just got around to recording that second one. But I'm here. I kind of had to force you to have me on, but I'm glad that at least after some persistence, you said yes.
Hey, you ask me and I'll do what you want, all right? Because you started me on this journey and always got time for you, mate.
Appreciate that.
Before you get into your questions for me,
okay,
has predominantly playing draft changed your philosophy on Classic?
It's an interesting question, Mr. Damo. So for those who don't know, used to do Jock Reynolds, did it for many, many, many years while doing content, was not great at SuperCoach Classic. In fact, every year that I did content, the worse I performed until I finally decided to hang up the boots. Did okay in 2023, I think it was. So has my philosophy changed? I think, by the way, Code Sports is where you can read my articles. I'll just do some plugs, Damo, and you can listen to the official Drafted podcast on SuperCoach, where I will sporadically be appearing. Since moving to SuperCoach content, Damo, the last 2 years of doing almost weekly content, my SuperCoach game has increased dramatically in terms of overall rank, finished top 1% in the last 2 years. And I think the main reason is patience and not overreacting. You're kind of stuck with the players you have in draft, and that's the approach I've taken into Classics. So the last 2 years, I haven't traded out primos that have been underperforming at the time. I haven't been made any unforced trades, just focused on the rookies and starting with mid prices that will outperform those rookies, guys that will outperform their price point. And I mean, the last 2 years, I've entered the final 2 rounds with multiple trades in hand, at least 2 trades in hand, and at least 2 pseudo premiums on the bench to loop. So it's a long way of saying, Damo, that yes, it has taught me patience and probably not to overreact to, that the surface level top, oh my God, Hayden Young's only scored 80 points in the first 2 rounds sort of stuff. So yeah, it has changed.
I feel very seen with that Hayden Young line. He was the one player I corrected at the beginning of last season, and I wish I never did.
No, look, I did correct him as well, and he was probably my big mistake from last year. But having a guy like Brodie Grundy, for instance, a lot of people jumped off. I know you did as well, Damo, at a point. I just held him because I just thought, end of the year, this guy's going to be a top 3 or 4 ruck. The point differential is not going to be massive. And it ended up that way, which was lucky for me. And it was always in my mind that I might upgrade him at some point, but it was just never a priority. And what it meant was, at the end of the year, I could make some sort of, in that last week, especially for rank, but also for the league grand finals, I could make some tactical changes.
So you've got questions for me about this season. Did you want to get away with your first one?
I do. And so I'm going to be completely upfront with you, Damo, and the audience. My team prior to 4 minutes ago was the team I made in December and imported into SuperCoach Classic. I have no idea what's happening this footy season. I've been talking about players on the Drafted podcast like I'm some sort of genius, and Dossie's been like, yeah, bro, everyone in Classic has them in their team. So I'm a complete, looking at this for the first time. Damo, what's the deal with opening round? Who's playing? What teams are in it? What big players are involved? What's going on?
Yeah, so opening round, same as last season. The 4 northeastern clubs host 4 other teams in their home states. So, and it doesn't count in SuperCoach. So the Suns, the Giants, the Lions, and the Swans host Collingwood, Geelong, Essendon, and the Hawks in round 0 is what people are calling it because it doesn't count towards Supercoach. It's just an extra round. These 8 teams, we get to see the players that we're not quite sure on before the season begins. So there's a positive and a negative to it because even though we get to see the players early in a non-Supercoach relevant situation, it becomes relevant because there's the early buys later in the season. And this year, the buys happen in rounds 2, 3, and 4 to make up for the extra game that they play in round 0. And it means that the players we pick from those teams play one less game for the entire season. And that is in a lot of people's thinking when they put their team together. And you have players like Will Day, Jai Newcomb, James Sicily, Nick Dacos, Max Holmes, Matt Rowell, Lockie Neal, Tom Green, those sorts of players. So highly relevant players who are caught up in this opening round business.
So I guess a couple follow-up questions. And for the audience, some of this is a little bit of an act on my behalf. I know the answer to some of these questions. I did not have any idea who was playing opening rounds. But so the points don't count in opening round, but presumably that's still factored into their price like it was last year?
Yep. So the price changes will still happen after 2 games, but one of those games that for those opening round players will not count for Supercoach in a points scored way.
So you mentioned a few players there that have the early buys, and I guess that's my next question. I got a couple of those guys. I got Max Holmes, I got Nick Dacos. I can't remember all the teams you said, but I've got a couple guys from those buy rounds. Does it mean I don't pick those guys? Does it mean I'm better off just like hoping I can get them later on?
The best part about the buy rounds is it's best 18 scorers. So you can have 18 scorers on your field. You can have 20 scorers. You can have 21 scorers and 18 best scores count. So you can have some players from the opening rounds, but you don't want to stack them too much that you don't have 18 scores for that week.
Yeah, and presumably I've probably got of guys that I would consider potential keepers by the end of the year, which is including your Millses and your Peatlings. I've got like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So if 3 of them are on those early buys, it means I might get away with it. But if they're all in one buy round, I think I'm going to struggle because as much as I love all the rookies I can see, I'm just not sure how they'll go scoring wise.
Yeah, and the rookies are the bit that is sort of on coaches' minds a lot at the moment because practice matches have started. We're not seeing the roles that we wanted from rookies. We're forgetting that some rookies only do score 40 or 50 points in a game, and that's what we have to live with. But yeah, so rookies is one thing that people are worried about, especially when it comes to covering those early buy round premiums. But last year we got out of the early buy rounds and everyone was like, oh, that wasn't so bad. So I think people are just kind of overthinking the preseason a bit at the moment, and we're coming to that stage where everyone's overreacting, trying to get the perfect team, even though, let's be honest, the perfect team doesn't exist because I think the last 4 winners have had a starting team that everyone sort of goes, oh, wow, I didn't think I would have a starter team looking like that.
Yeah, great. So with rookies as well, and this isn't a question, this is more just a sidebar, I think we forget historically, like we've been very gifted the last few years with what scores rookies put up. But Damo, you know my philosophy. If a bloke's going to play every week as a rookie and only score 50 to 60 points, I'm actually okay with it because I'd rather the option that they might cover someone than they score 70 one week and don't play the next week.
Yeah, for sure. And I think last year we can look at a guy like Josh Draper that debuted for the Dockers. He played 20 games for the entire season, only averaged 20, but was bargain basement bottom dollar in defense. He played 20 games, averaging 49, only made about 160K on his price. Very slow burn, but he was a guy that if someone missed, that's 40 to 50 points that you could just stick on your field. And, yes, you're probably going to miss out on 30 points or 40 points and be that much behind, but at least you're not working out a zero, you know?
Yeah, you might hear me clicking. I'm just desperately trying to remember the defender I had a few years ago. I feel like he was a key defender that went from Collingwood to St Kilda or St Kilda to Collingwood. I honestly can't remember who it was. But like, he was awful, but he sat at my D8 all year. And in the 3 games I had no way to cover, he just gave me like 50 points. And I think we probably don't appreciate that enough as super coaches.
Yeah, that name doesn't come to my mind, unfortunately. I can't help you there.
There'll be people screaming at their devices as we fumble. So we've talked about buys, Damo. The later buys, how do they sort of line up? Is there one buy that has heaps of good players in it and another buy that doesn't? Just for background, Damo, my general rule, despite the fact that I used to write articles saying you need to prepare for the buys, as long as I've got one guy that I think I can captain in each buy, I actually don't have historically not even looked at it and just traded my way into buy cover. But is that something that's maybe not possible this year?
The great thing about the buys this season is there's no more than 4 teams in any one buy round. So previously there were 6 that you had to navigate, but now there's only 4 in each buy round at a maximum. And the one that people are most worried about is round 12 because that features Carlton, North Melbourne, Port Adelaide, and the Western Bulldogs. So the likes of Zach Butters, Marcus Bontempelli, Harry Sheasel, Patrick Cripps, Sam Walsh, Tom DeConning, those sort of guys that people are wanting to start with, those guys all have the same buy round in round 12. But then you flip the coin and round 13 only features St Kilda and Fremantle. And those 2 teams only have one buy for the entire season. You could probably start 2 or 3 St Kilda players and 2 or 3 Dockers players, and then that's sort of covers all the rest of your buy rounds as being some extra players for you. So round 12 is the one that people are most worried about. Round 13 people aren't quite so worried about. Round 14 is one that people are also discussing because that's Collingwood, Suns, Sydney and Richmond. Richmond for a point that they're a young side. They hit the draft really, really heavily, and so we might see a lot of rookies come through, and that might be around where the rookies drop off because, you know, we've seen in the past that sometimes rookies will get rested in the buy round, something will happen in the buy round, and then the team comes out of the buy round and they're debuting a whole new slew of players, and the players that we're in are now back in the VFL to work on things. So that's another one that people are sort of worried about because Collingwood also have Nick Dacos, Sydney has Isaac Heaney, Chad Warner, Brodie Grundy, those sorts of players. So I think all the buy rounds have ups and downs, but the great thing I think that people are forgetting is there's no more than 4 teams in one buy round this season.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it now. There's 8 buy rounds across the year, which I think is just, and I've said this for a couple of years, I think they're just getting us ready for the inevitable 19th team and when we have a buy every single week, which is going to be interesting. I like the Freo shout, Damo. I don't have them all in there at the moment, but I think Jordan Clark, Andrew Brayshaw, Caleb Serrone are all some of the best picks you could make in SuperCoach this year. At least in draft, I'm operating that way. So, just explain the flex to me. Just one more time. I get the principle of it, but there's something about loopholing that doesn't work with it or something?
Yeah, so flex is a 23rd player on your field that can count in your scores if it's in your best 22. So your 22 best scores of the 23 on your field are what counts for that round. It doesn't work for loopholing because there is no bench position that interacts with the flex position. So you can put your VC there, but you can't use it as your captain's loophole.
Right, because if I put a 0 on, like with the captaincy on there's no one to cover it. So that 0 presumably counts as a 0.
Yeah, correct. So the 0 isn't in your best 22 scorers. There's no one on the bench that interacts with the flex position. So you get 22 scores without a doubled captaincy score.
Okay.
You don't even get your VC score doubled.
So I'm just going to not put my VC or C anywhere near the flex position. I just think that's the safest solution for me.
You can put your VC there because your VC score will count regardless of what you do with your C anywhere else on your field. But your C, don't put in your flex position. Your captain, don't put in that flex position.
And I guess a follow-on question to this is just for my knowledge, right? So same salary cap, one extra player in the team because of the flex position. Presumably that means the general, like my team always looks like this with underpriced players and a few punts. Presumably most people are doing this and there's less of a guns and rookies approach.
So SuperCoach was kind to us and dropped every salary, or dropped their magic number, as people call it, by about 3%. So it means that we get a little bit more cap to play with, and we still get to pick the players that we like. We can still go with a mostly guns and rookies approach. But yeah, that flex position is interesting because I don't think anyone knows exactly what they want to do with it. Some people are putting a third ruckman there. Some people are putting another rookie there, using it as a ticket to start another high priced rookie. You know, those 180k, 190k guys, and some people are using it, you know, to put in a mid priced gamble that they're hoping has a pretty high ceiling, but doesn't count if they completely shit the bed.
Yeah, so personally right now I have James Peatling sitting there for that reason. I think he's a great pick this year. I don't think I'm special in saying that. But my gut instinct, without thinking about it or doing the maths, looking at the standard deviation of players, is that a third ruckman, full premium priced ruckman, is probably the correct answer. But I haven't actually played with any of those numbers and had a chance to look at that. When the team picker came out last year, my first response was, okay, I've got Tim English, Max Gawn, and I'm chucking in, you know, whatever it was, third ruckman, Tom DeConning in there, but it just hasn't shaped that way at the moment. But I've just got a feeling that the third ruckman's going to be the way to go, but it's hard to do.
Yeah, and the great thing is there is no correct answer at the moment because it's the first time it's come into SuperCoach AFL. It was in the BBL format, and people use that in a weird way for that format, but doesn't really carry over into the AFL format. But I think eventually people will use it to put in another high-end midfielder, another high-end ruckman, just because those two positions probably have the most consistent score base.
Interesting. So I got a couple more questions for you, Damo. First of all, are there any players that are historically popular in SuperCoach, and I'd say that Tom Green's an example of this, that are currently injured and you just can't select them?
Yeah, so you mentioned Tom Green. He's out with a calf issue for the next 4 to 6 weeks, so he's not due back until about gather round, which is round 5. And if you're talking about percentage owned at the moment, Sam Lawler, I think his name is supposed to be pronounced, was the number 1 pick in the last draft, went to Richmond. He's got a fractured jaw at the moment, so he's in complete doubt for round 1. He's in 25% of teams. And we saw Gideon Coleman come into a lot of teams last year, injure his ACL in that opening round last season. Well, he's still about 4 or 5, maybe 6 weeks away from returning to the Brisbane lineup, and he's still in 21% of teams. So there's a few popular guys that people that are slow to move, but I mean, it could be a price point thing that they're not rushing to move them because they're waiting to see who comes up in that price point. But it'll be one of those players that if people don't move them quick enough, then opening round, round 1 will happen. I keep saying opening round, but opening round doesn't count. Round 1 will happen and you won't be able to move that player and you're stuck with a 0 and you'll have to start looping, and then you've got 260, 300k, just sitting there wasted.
Okay, one to watch. Obvious role changes or people coming back from injury, a la Callum Mills is one I know, and I probably underranked in my draft rankings over at Code Sports. Is there anyone else in this ballpark? Gideon Coleman was one I was going to ask about. Like I knew he was injured. I didn't know what the return date was. So is there anyone else in this realm of, obvious new opportunity guys?
So the most owned player in SuperCoach right this minute is Caleb Daniel. He's in 69.6% of teams. He's moved from the Western Bulldogs to North Melbourne, and it looks like he's going to take up that half-back role that he had a few years ago under Luke Beveridge, where he was the main distributor. He took all the kick-ins. Well, it looks like he's going to have that back, and at 269k, only a couple thousand higher than the highest rookie price, even if he doesn't get back to his 95, 100 average, he only needs to average 75 to 80 to be a successful pick. So I think he's a no-brainer for most people. Bailey Smith has moved to Geelong. People are hot on him. I think the thing that people are forgetting is Bailey Smith has never done it before, though. So it's more of a speculative. He fits in the position. They're talking highly of him. It's a guy that fits in the situation kind of thing. But he's $389K, a bit cheaper, so he doesn't need to set the world on fire to be a popular pick or to be a successful pick. But even if he only averages 90 to 95, he could still end up in the top 10 forwards. So $389K, you're getting a discount there for potentially what is a top 10 forward. And then Elijah Hewitt at West Coast, he missed all of last season, was a top-end rookie for West Coast. New coaches come in. Andrew McQualter has injected him straight into the midfield, and he looks like he's going to be a centre bounce player for West Coast. And he completely lit up the practice game during the week against Richmond, and looks like he's over whatever issue he had because there was no sign of it. So $122K, dual position player, forward mid. He's another guy that people are locking in and even having on their field. And at $122K, 63% of him have him, and it seems to be a no-brainer pick.
Yeah, great. I think I'll echo your sentiments on Bailey Smith. I do currently have him at F3, but I have him relatively low in my draft rankings because I just haven't seen it before, with the exception of 10 games, in 4 years ago or whenever it was. But he's helped by being in that forward line.
Yeah, Bailey Smith, I think people are forgetting that his highest ever average is about 93, and it was because there was one really high ceiling game in that year, and he only played something like 11 games. So, he's probably going to be a good enough forward that we can keep him for the entire year, but I think people are forgetting that he's never actually done it before. He's still quite a young guy.
Yeah, and maybe there's upside there. I think he's going to be okay. A couple other guys I think that fit into this, and maybe you'll tell me they shouldn't be in my team, but it's like Tom Lynch, Sam Powell-Pepper, Clayton Oliver, those sort of guys.
Yeah, Clayton Oliver looks like he's come back in ripping nick. He turned up to Melbourne preseason early with all the first to fourth year guys, so he really wants to put that last year behind him and, it's turn a new page, return to how he was before. You mentioned also Tom Lynch as well. He's another popular rookie option. I don't love picking key forwards as rookie options, but Tom Lynch has averaged 90 plus in a bottom of the ladder Gold Coast Suns team. So there's every chance that he can, replicate those sort of numbers. But at 180K, he doesn't need to do much to make money for us. And Sam Powell-Pepper, well, he's one that I probably am leaving behind because I think he's going to be too defensive, too much of a negating player to score points of his own. And while he might have the job security being part of the Port Adelaide leadership group, I just don't think the scoring base will be there for us.
Yeah, sort of historically scores around that 70 mark, but the last full season he was under 70, so I get that. But, he ticks all my boxes in that he will play, which is really my number one tick box. Couple more just quick ones for you. Are there any sub 100K rookies that we think we will actually see?
Yeah, there are a few 99K guys that people are keeping a close eye on. So the most popular one at the moment is Harry Boyd, who he averaged 156 SuperCoach points in the Sandful last season. He was the Margaret medalist, so the best and fairest in the Sandful as well. He's signed with St Kilda. He's more of a ruckman than a forward, but it sounds like they want Rowan Marshall to have a forward role. So he's a massive chance to play in St Kilda's best side, but they're worried about how much he can impact when having to rest forward. So there is the chance that he doesn't line up. But he seems like the guy who's going to get a game out of all the 99K ruckman. So if you're looking for an R3, he's probably the one to start, but he may not play every single game and he might not even be there for round one, but he's a guy that's probably going to come in every so often, perhaps. The other guy that just was added to SuperCoach today after signed during the week is Jack Henderson. He was best on ground for Werribee in the most recent VFL grand final. He was training with West Coast, but Melbourne sort of snuck under and signed him out from under them. And you don't do that if you're not going to play someone. So he's probably ahead of a Xavier Lindsay now, is potentially in that Melbourne 22. But Melbourne are also dealing with a pretty light forward line at the moment, thanks to injuries.
Well, you mentioned the ruck 3 position there, and Harry Boyd seems to be the most popular one. But is there anyone realistically that might fit in that role? I see Liam Reedy has some ownership. Is there any forward ruck that I should pick? I hate going in with a 0, but that flexibility tends to be helpful. Like, what's your general vibe there?
Yeah, so Liam Reedy, he's going to play when Sean Darcy is missing, and it sounds like Sean Darcy's only going to be missing for the first 3 to 5 rounds, and that's probably not enough time for Liam Reedy to make enough cash for anyone to start him at 132k, slightly elevated rookie price. I don't know if he's worth the investment. That extra 15, 20k might be better served elsewhere, with the rookies looking a bit thin at that lower end of the scale. Archer Reed at West Coast, he's a dual position. He's sort of slotted into that old Jack Darling role now that he's left West Coast, and they've been playing him in the A side in all of their match simulations. So he's a guy that might actually score and might actually play, but you're probably looking at like 30s and 40s on your bench, which might be fine at that price because he might double his price and then be able to be cashed out for someone later on. And then, Harry Boyd is probably the other guy that people will probably start with. Bottom basement, 99k. Whether he plays or not, it's the lowest investment that you can make in a position. And he might play, he might not. He's got the chops to sort of match it with the big boys. And yeah, could be good for St Kilda if he actually gets a go.
Amazing stuff. And we've actually gone through all my questions. Damo, I feel much smarter now.
Thanks for asking me all the questions, Lek. You definitely got my brain moving with a lot of them. Where can people find you?
Well, you can see my stuff on Code Sports. You can see the Drafted podcast on the official SuperCoach feed for podcasts. It's also, I think, on the Code Sports YouTube channel. I have a YouTube channel called Alexi_does. It has nothing to do with football at all, but I have a channel there if you want to go and subscribe and watch me paint models. Other than that, like, I'm kind of playing it pretty low key on the socials these days. But yeah, I'm around.
This has been the Footy Mailbag bonus episodes. Head to thefootymailbag.net for all the links to our socials.